This video contains a Books and Brews first. Hi, welcome, come on in. My name is Aoife and today I am going to take you through another Books and Brews video. In this video series, I will talk about 3 books that all have a kind of similar theme, whether they all have the same color cover, whether they all were written about the same topic or idea, but today is a little bit different. The 3 books in today's Books and Brews video were all recommended in a podcast episode that I listened to a couple of weeks ago. The podcast is called Friends to Lovers, and it features 2 women, Mackenzie and Lily, who sit together and talk about issues around romance books, contemporary romance, historical romance. They also bring on some guests to talk about some topics that they might not have a lot of experience or information about, and then share their topics with us. The episode that caught my eye was a contemporary romance starter pack where the 2 of them went through some books that they think are a really great idea to start with if you are just getting into the contemporary romance genre. I had read a lot of the books that they talked about, but 3 of them came up that not only had I not read, but I already had access to copies. So let's talk about what I thought about all 3 of those. The first book that I read was The Right Swipe by Alicia Rai. I have spoken a couple of times here about how much I've wanted to read this book. It's been on my radar for such a long time. I got a copy of this and the second book in the series, Girl Gone Viral, on my Kindle as a Christmas present in 2019, but somehow never actually managed to pick up either of them. This book follows Rhiannon and Samson. Samson is a former NFL player and Rhiannon is working in the tech industry. She's put together a dating app called Swipe, which works kind of like Tinder crossed with Bumble in that the woman is given the option to start the conversation first. Rhiannon also uses her own app under a fake name, and one night she swiped right on Samson, who also swiped right, and the 2 of them ended up hooking up together. He had tried to get back in touch with her, and she had tried to get back in touch with him, but because he hadn't got her actual name, he found it really hard to find her. The 2 of them reconnect while they are at a tech conference in Texas. They both end up being on the same panel talking about different dating apps. It turns out that Samson is the nephew of one of Rhiannon's biggest competitors that she's trying to buy out. And they end up hooking up again, and then they decide to kind of fake date each other and test out the apps together. There was a lot that I really enjoyed about this book. One of the things that I really loved here is the importance of platonic relationships. Rhiannon has a really great relationship with Katrina, her assistant, and also Samson has a wonderful relationship with his surviving aunt Annabelle. There's also quite a lot of bereavement and grief in this book. Prior to the events of this book at all, Annabelle, Samson's aunt, has lost her sister and her husband to 2 different diseases. And I also really liked that there was a kind of a tie-in here with some injuries that players will have gotten from playing in the NFL, sort of like concussions and the repercussions of having that. And I really liked how that was addressed in the book. Something else that I really liked in this book was the steamy scenes. They were phenomenally well written. They were also placed really strategically throughout the book, and I really liked how they were used quite effectively. But also something that I really enjoyed was the importance that was placed on safe sex. It's not something that I have seen come up in a lot of other books. For instance, there was one time that neither of them had a condom but decided, we're going to go and do other things, but we're not going to have penetrative sex, and that was so good to see in a romance book. The book also touches on the Me Too movement in a slight way, and I really liked how this was addressed. It didn't feel shoehorned in for representation. It didn't feel like it was just done to cause a controversy. It was really well handled. However, there were a couple of things that didn't gel so well with me. There's quite a lot of miscommunication in this book, particularly between Samson and Rhiannon when you're talking about the reason that they didn't meet up again. It turns out that it was super easy to have just rearranged another day for them. Like quite a lot of romance books, there's the 3rd act conflict and then there's a 3rd act breakup, and I didn't really love how this one was done here. I felt like it was a little bit contrived. There didn't really seem to be a reason for that one to have been done in the way that it was. And I don't really think that it added anything to the book, but overall, I really enjoyed my time with Rhiannon and Samson. I'm definitely going to continue on this series, and I gave this one 4 stars. Then we come on to, unfortunately, the Books and Brews first. I also picked up The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory, and this is the first in what is, at the moment, a series of 6 books. I don't think that they're all super connected. I think there might be characters who turn up in this one that were a side character here. Considering how I got on with the first book, I don't know if I'm going to continue on with the rest of the series. This book follows Alexa and Drew, who are in a lift together, but it breaks down and they're stuck together for about 20 minutes, half an hour. In this 20 minutes, it turns out that Alexa's sister is here to visit her to kind of celebrate a new promotion, and the two of them are going to go out and celebrate while Drew is in the city for a wedding that he has been invited to, that it turns out is the wedding of his ex and one of his best friends. Drew doesn't want to go to the wedding by himself, understandably, so asks Alexa if she's free for the weekend, if she would consider coming to the wedding with him as his plus one, just so that he can save face a little bit. From the sounds of the book, I thought that that was going to be the entire thing, that the whole weekend would be stretched out across the entire 300 or 400 pages, much like the last season of How I Met Your Mother. I did not get what I signed up for. The wedding itself takes about the first 100 to 120 pages. After that, you're then thrown into this kind of long distance relationship between Alexa and Drew, where they get together, they fly to each other's cities, they have sex, they go out and have food, and they just never address what's happening between the two of them. There's never a moment where they sit down and say, I'm actually really into you, and I would like to see if we can bring this a little bit further. What do you think about that? None of them really do that, but they also have this entire internal monologue of, okay, so we meet up every weekend and we hook up and we go out for food, but does he like me or does he like me? That was a huge miscommunication for me. There were a couple of other things in the book that just didn't gel well with me, so unfortunately I DNF'd this book at about 45% in. By a pure coincidence, all of the books in this video are written by Black authors and feature Black or POC characters as the main character. And the final book that I am going to talk about is The Marriage Game by Sarah Desai. This book follows Layla, who has lost her job, her relationship has broken down, so she goes back from New York to San Francisco where she grew up. Her parents own a Michelin star restaurant called the Spice Mill, and here they serve a lot of really nice Indian food, so there is some phenomenal descriptions of Indian food, Indian cuisine, Indian culture, all the way throughout this book. You're also following Sam, who works as a kind of professional firer. He goes around to companies and considers how to get rid of the staff that they have. Sam has rented the office space that is above Layla's parents' restaurant, but the problem is that Layla has also been promised this, but just before her father is due to call Sam and tell him that the deal is off, Layla's father has a heart attack and ends up in hospital. So because of this kind of lack of communication, understandable in this sense, I will say, the two of them have to end up sharing an office. Then one day a man turns up at the front door and says, I am here as Layla's husband. She has absolutely no idea that her father has signed her up to a Desi website for finding an arranged marriage, dating around. Sam and Layla then decide that she's going to go on all of these 10 dates that her father has set up for her, but he's going to be there as kind of her male chaperone and see what kind of situations she's getting herself into. As you can imagine, things start to heat up between the two of them. This is a real enemies to lovers romance, and I absolutely love an enemies to lovers romance, so you would think that this is the perfect book for me. But there were a couple of things that let me down. As I've said, I really enjoyed the Indian representation. I cannot honestly put my hand on my heart and say that it was done well, but I really enjoyed reading it. I loved reading the kind of respect that people show to their elders in Indian culture. I loved, as I said, reading about the food that features here. Also featured in this book is Layla's best friend Daisy, who gets her own book in the second book, The Dating Plan, and I'm so excited to see what that book is like because I really enjoyed reading Daisy as a character, even though at times she was a little bit overbearing. I will also say there is quite a strong trigger warning for an abusive relationship. It turns out that Layla's partner had been cheating on her back in New York, and that's one of the main reasons she's come back to San Francisco. There's also a viral video that has come around of when Layla finds out that her partner is cheating on her, and a huge argument and a row, physicality breaks out between the two of them. This is something that I didn't really enjoy reading. I don't particularly enjoy reading about abusive relationships, so it is something to go into with a little bit of trepidation if you aren't into that kind of thing as well. I do also have to address that Sam is not the hero I wanted him to be. As you can imagine by the line of work that he's in, he's very arrogant, he's very cocky, but I also found him quite misogynistic, especially towards Layla. Within the first maybe 5 minutes of them meeting, Sam's inner monologue just turns right away into sexualizing her. I didn't particularly love that side of it, and I would have preferred a kind of gentler approach into their relationship. Quite a lot of people that I have seen on reviews that I've read when finishing this book had a similar reaction to me to something that happens about 75% of the way into the book. I'm not going to give too much detail away of what happened here, but Sam does cohort with another friend of his to basically bring a lot of turmoil and stress onto Layla's family, who are, of course, already going through quite a lot of stress and turmoil given her father's medical problems recently. That was something that I absolutely hated reading, and it was a big red flag for me when her family were really pleased that Layla and Sam got together by the end of the book. It's definitely something that soured my relationship with this book, and definitely soured my relationship with Sam as a whole. So that did knock a whole star off of this one for me. It could have been a 4 at the start of the book. I was really loving it, but it ended up being about 3 stars. Those are just 3 of the books that have been recommended by the Friends to Lovers podcast. If you're interested in listening to them, I'm going to put a link into the description below. Have you read any of these books? What other kind of contemporary romances do you think I should pick up? Don't forget to like and subscribe because I have new videos up every week. Now, get on out of here.